Welcome to the Energy Professionals Roundtable. This is the second of its kind that we are running, and we are very excited to have this forum where energy professionals can get together and talk. We welcome you to this particular meeting, whose theme is Emerging Considerations for the Energy Sector in Africa and How to Chart a Path to the New Normal. We have speakers from all around Africa, and it's very exciting to see them here this morning. Welcome all our speakers. We have a special place for you in our hearts. You have a warmer welcome than everybody else. Thank you for taking your time to come and share with us. This is part of a series of programs that we are running towards World Energy Day. The World Energy Day is in October, but in the run-up to that, we have a series of high-impact programs. Programs for the youth, programs dealing with clean energy, programs dealing with renewables, programs dealing with energy efficiency, water, and we're running online forums such as this to enable us to talk and get together as we run up to the actual physical event. It is our anticipation that by October, the world will have opened up and that we shall be able to meet in a conference setting, or if not, in an online setting such as this. The theme for the overarching World Energy Day is the future of energy in Africa. And so we need to look at the future, and the future is now. Before we get into the actual meeting, I would like to request our technical support, Moses, to kindly run us through our housekeeping rules, our rules of engagement, so that we run a fabulous meeting. Moses, would you kindly address us?
Okay, thank you very much. I will briefly go through the housekeeping rules. Okay, the first one is ensure you have around at least 1 GB of data to sustain the meeting. And if you're using Wi-Fi, try to be as close as possible to your Wi-Fi device, not more than 1 meter away. Avoid disruptions of noise and movement in your background by identifying a quiet space for the meeting, and try and have your video on so that you can also see you, and it's also how we will be able to interact and have fun during the meeting. Log into the Zoom meeting using your official 2 names and the name of your organization right next to your name, and you can also see the when you click on the participants list, you'll be able to see my name as Moses Waihura _ Zoom technician. So for example, you could say Matthew Waiter _ Safaricom PLC, so that we will be able to identify you. The meeting shall be recorded and the video sent to each participant. If you have any reservations, if you would not like the video recorded when you are speaking, kindly let me know in the chat. Avoid logging in to the meeting using 2 devices. This will cause an echo when you speak. Everyone is muted and shall be unmuted only when called upon to speak. And when you are asking a question, kindly try to limit your question to 1 minute, and you have 30 seconds to sum up your question. And if you are making a comment, you have a maximum of 2 minutes to make your comment, after which you have 30 seconds to summarize. The chat function shall be made available only during the speaker session, and that shall be made known by the moderator, so that we will give time for questions and comments. To answer a question or to make a contribution, kindly raise your hand on video or on the participants list, or type or chat to myself that you have a question, in case you do not have that option to raise your hand on the participants list once you click on the participants icon at the bottom of your screen. Finally, maintain good meeting etiquette throughout the meeting. Back to you, our moderator.
Thank you very much, Moses. It's very important when we are gathering like this to have our sense of order. We'd also like to request your help. In our last meeting, most unfortunately, we had one of the Zoom bombing type of incidents. And so please do help us look around, because you can be as vigilant as we. And if you see anybody that sounds or looks a little bit strange, please do alert Moses so that we can remove them from the room. But we are trusting that we shall run a great meeting and that we shall have no strange intrusions. So welcome. Before we get into today's meeting, I want us to slightly recap what we did last time. We had a fantastic meeting and we were talking about the effects of COVID-19 on the energy sector in Kenya. I'd love for you to take a look at the report that came out of this meeting and for us to just take a quick look at what we discussed and why it was that important. So for those of you who haven't interacted with the report as yet, I would encourage you to please look for it on our website, the World Energy Day website, and then we can then run it from there. You can then take a look at it from there. So this is the report. Let me move the waiting room. This is the report. It's a fantastic report, beautiful report. We discussed many things. We discussed how to work from home. We discussed technology and communication. We discussed movement about work. The report has various questions that we asked ourselves, and we're looking at the reality on the ground. We're looking at what we must do differently. We're looking at resilience, and we're looking at what we must change in the energy plans that we have had and the lessons that we have learned so far. So it is my encouragement to everybody in the room to look through this report. It is not a long report, but it is a very, very impactful report. And as we keep on saying, a meeting is only as good as the report that comes out of it. So if you have been to a meeting and you have no actions from that meeting, or there's nothing substantial coming from that meeting, then you need to ask about the value that that meeting has placed on your life. So please download the report and take a look at it. And from this meeting as well, we shall produce a great report. So welcome and feel at home. We want to get right into our discussion for the day. And our first speaker up, we have a series of speakers from all around Africa. We will hear from Nigeria, from Tunisia, from South Africa, from Kenya, from Uganda. And we've had so many speakers from other countries knocking on the door, asking, why don't you include our country? And so with your permission, we will run another energy forum such as this and include other countries that are asking to come and share their experiences, and so that we around Africa can put our heads together and change the landscape. World Energy Day is brought to you by Area of Energy and innovators. And so at this point, before we get into our first speaker, I'd like Jenny to say one or two words and welcome the people, and then we can move into the main program. Jenny is the co-founder and CEO at Area of Energy. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's a pleasure to be attending this second World Energy Day Zoom meeting. The first one was really, I was going to say profound. A lot of really great points were brought up, a lot of talking points, gave us a lot to think about. So I'm very excited for this next one, you know, really where we're going to be looking at challenges. We're going to look what kind of mechanisms we can propose. How can we be active and involved and really leading our own destiny by encouraging government change, encouraging government support. We're all in the energy sector. We all know energy is absolutely critical to livelihoods, GDP. So really, you know, it's in our hands to be active and take the measures, work together so that we can really take on the challenges of COVID-19 has put in our way. We can look at measures governments are taking to help the energy sector, businesses in the energy sector. We can try and bring those to our countries because it really hasn't been business as usual. But together, we really need to make sure that the energy sector stands strong, that it's supported by governments, and that we continue to all grow. So, you know, we're all here. Carolyn, I hope that by October, Kenya is opening up again, and many other countries, some are ahead of us. And I'm sure we'll be hearing about that from these countries. We've got a number of people from all over on this call. Really welcome. We look forward to hearing your views and really moving forward to making sure that we encourage each other, support each other, and come up with some very cohesive policies that we can work towards and push towards together as energy professionals in Africa. So thank you. And with that, I hand it back to Carolyn and really look forward to the rest of this session. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jenny. Always an inspiration to hear from you and your passion for changing the energy landscape in this continent and world over. So let's dive right into it. Our first speaker for the day is from Kenya. Yes, we know we're in Africa, but yeah, home comes first. And so we'll have our first speaker from Kenya and then allow the rest of the speakers to say their bit. So our first speaker from Kenya is Andy Amadi. Now, if you're an energy professional and you don't know Andy Amadi, I invite you to check your status once again, because Andy is the most well-known, most respected energy professional this side of the continent. If I start to read Andy Amadi's bio, the entire meeting will be taken up by reading credential after credential. And what impresses me the most, Andy, yes, I went and scouted you out. His LinkedIn profile has a creed. It has a commitment. It has a mandate that says what he is promising the world with regards to energy change and creating energy impact. So that's how passionate Andy is about energy. He's a consultant, a professional, a trainer, gives advisory. I could go on and on. And so Andy, with the overarching theme that we are thinking about, the energy area during COVID-19, the emerging considerations, how do we chart a path to the new normal? Please talk to us. You have about 10 minutes or so to give us your thoughts. And if you could center them around clean energy and renewables, we would be happy, and to take a wider perspective if you so desire. So ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Andy Amadi. Welcome, Andy Amadi.
Thank you for that very flattering introduction. I had to look behind me and wonder who is this that Caroline is talking about, because I think, to use the words of, was it Mark Twain, that it sounds a little bit exaggerated. But that aside, it's a pleasure to be here and to be discussing these clean energy aspects as relates to COVID. And I think one thing that we need to integrate, I think, in our planning and in whatever we're doing, is that COVID is a permanent situation. And we normally don't think in terms of, within our culture, why we do some of the things that we do the way that we do them. But if you look back in history, you find there was something that happened. There was the bubonic plague that happened, and sanitation became an issue. There was the Spanish flu, and that probably led to the acceptance of some kind of universal healthcare. And now COVID is here, and it's a permanent situation. And I start to think that we shouldn't be looking at when it is over, but we should be looking at how are we going to adapt to this as a permanent situation. Now, bringing it back to energy, the one thing, and we are literally doing it right now, that this situation has brought is decentralization of people as beings. So that has created a decentralized demand, because we, in order for us to collaborate, we all need to have our energy where we are. Now, there is an opportunity. So if I'm looking at it short-term, mid-term, and long-term, short-term, there is an opportunity, because when it comes to the work that we do, many of us are knowledge workers. That means that we work with computers, that we require storage, we require powering of our devices in order for us to be effective. Now, from an energy perspective, that in itself becomes something to consider, that these devices need power throughout. Whether you're looking at the lowest denominator, which could probably be the mobile phone, and the storage solution is the power bank. But what powers the power bank? Can I power a power bank with a 2-watt or a 1-watt panel? And if I did that and I got my power bank and my mobile phone completely off the grid, then I know that I will always be in communication so long as I've got access to the sun. So that becomes short term. And if you expand this into looking at the medical area, where we have seen that there is an urgent need for expanding medical services to deal with COVID. Once again, decentralization. As far as possible, we need to take these things to people where they are. So if we're looking at it now in terms of if that we haven't reached that state in Kenya, and that is a really grateful place to be, but if we were in that place where we need to have 600 ventilators in Marsabit or in Mandera, there's no electricity grid there. Are you going to mobilize generators to run this? We can pre-design solutions for these applications. And that for me, I have seen as a permanent thing. And the question, the rationale is, does it make sense or is it just overreacting to this current problem? And it makes sense. I honestly do not see the problem with my mobile phone being 100% solar powered because I bought a solar panel because there was COVID. That is not a bad problem to have. So that is how I am seeing this playing out. Along the same theme of decentralization is also planning and development of what is required. And looking at it now in the midterm, where we have to expand and provide some level of improved healthcare. So we need to be looking at the health energy nexus. How is healthcare being limited by energy? How do we need to have essential services off the grid, so to speak? Or can we be able to afford to permanently have these facilities using energy to provide healthcare on some kind of form? So there again, using clean energy makes sense. They've tried it with generators in hospitals. It hasn't worked. They've tried, well, having the grid even in Kenya in hospitals. It's still not entirely working because you cannot have an operating theater when you have your electricity going on and off like Christmas lights. So they need backup solutions. They need to be as autonomous as possible. And that is one opportunity that renewable energy and clean energy is bringing. In the long term, we have to look at both recovery and growth. And that is where we in Africa have the biggest opportunity. That is where we are constrained by our physical infrastructure, but we're not constrained by the availability of the energy resources, which we can be able to use to achieve our recovery, growth, and development. So I would look at it that energy will be the ultimate driver. No matter how good an initiative or project you have, it needs energy. If we can be able to deploy anywhere in the world or anywhere on the continent in as little time as it takes to create a manufacturing or a processing plant, if we can bundle manufacturing resources with energy resources, then we cut down tremendously the period of time that it will require us to be able to recover through having one big centralized system that is moving at what my friends at KenGen call the speed of a turbine. And when they're talking about a turbine, they're talking about a hydro turbine, which in other words is to say it moves very slowly. I think my time looks like it's over. I want to be disciplined and keep to it. So I think on that note, I can hand over back to you, Caroline, and yes, and we continue with the program. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Andy. You still had 1 or 2 more minutes, so you could have wrapped up, but we'll allow you to do that as people ask questions. I propose that we take our second speaker, so please hold your questions for both Andy and our next speaker, and then we can run the question and answer session for both speakers. You may send your questions over to Moses on the chat, And when the chat is open, you can also send in your questions. We will also open the floor and unmute you should you have a question to ask. Thank you, Andy, for that very, very enlightening discussion. I have taken a few nuggets from there, but I will discuss them after we listen to our second speaker. Our second speaker for the day comes from South Africa. We are so pleased to welcome Heather McEwan. Heather McEwan is an award-winning, if you don't have an award in the energy space, I invite you to re-examine yourself, because when the world acknowledges you, it means that you have really, really put your heart and your soul into it. So Heather is an award-winning energy professional. She has 16 different certifications on her profile, 16. So for those of us running around saying, oh, I am a CEM, I am a CEA, I am an REP, she has all those plus more. So we are talking to a very heavy duty energy professional. Heather is very passionate about adaptation to change, enabling us make wise energy decisions, and to have the world really look at energy differently. Heather, please, karibu sana, we say karibu, this side of the world, feel very welcome. And we invite Heather over the overarching theme that we are talking about, emerging considerations for the energy sector in Africa, charting a path to the new normal. Heather will talk about what's happening in South Africa and also talk to us about the aspect of women and energy. Because if we don't talk about that, we will have made a gross omission. So let's give a round of applause for Heather. Heather, welcome to the meeting.
Morning, Carolyn and Jenny. Thank you very much. I think like Andy, I need to look over the back of my shoulder and see if it is actually me, you know. Anyway, thank you. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about South Africa as well as my own experience. And I've been working in the environmental field for some time in the 1980s. And then I was over in Kuwait for 10 years in the Middle East. And I'll explain later how that relates, where I worked on the claims that Kuwait made against the state of Iraq under law of war. And then back into South Africa, I got back into energy and carbon work and ISO 50,000, where I was doing a lot of energy management plans for large corporates. And the reason I mention that is that in Kuwait in 2008, now Kuwait is probably one of the wealthier countries of the world. They're 34 degrees north of the equator. They had load shedding and they have a huge air conditioning load. So I was quite surprised living there that would happen. And at the same time in South Africa and Cape Town, my family were experiencing load shedding and under a winter load, obviously, with a supply from the utility that they were battling. So for me, that started my energy journey, starting to think about supply and why it applied to all countries of the world. And I think it applies to obviously all of us in Africa. The other key thing I think is that, and it's important to note for women who are trying to create job opportunities, is that as your career changes, so does your ability to participate in the workforce. So for example, initially I was full-time, then when I went to Kuwait, I was part-time, then I stayed at home with kids. Now I'm probably more flexi time. So that needs to be taken into consideration when women are engaging with any sector, never mind the energy sector. And now with COVID, I think it's quite important to know that a lot of us have managed on our laptops, and it's pretty nice not to have to drive the kids and things around. So we are able to do a lot of work as ladies, which gets back to probably my points being that 3 emerging considerations I'd like to throw into the pot for discussion today. And the first is really the digitization. So we've seen a lot of digitization in the world today in the energy sector with online metering. Jobs can be created, just simply describing the data, working with the diagnostics, predictive, prescriptive data, the Internet of Things, setting up projects. We have blockchain, energy trading and microgrids are all being talked about. And whilst they were far down the line, perhaps they have arrived sooner than we think. So I'm looking more in the longer term than Andy was looking at in the shorter term. In COVID-19, I'd wish that I'd had more loggers out there so that I could assist my clients in telling them what was going on with the high base loads. And I think that Andy did put out a nice report showing at some stage where base loads, the loads had changed during lockdown in the various countries. I think in Kenya his report was, but we're experiencing exactly the same here in South Africa. And I was chatting to a gentleman yesterday who's got a client in London. And even though the business was closed down, he picked up that there was a high base load. And he was able to save that client £10,000 during the month of lockdown. So with the digitization, there is more opportunity for us, and ladies can capitalize on this. So the second point that I'd like to make is that there's emerging trends that I see in the energy sector is that it's ubiquitous and it's spread around the world, from country to continent and globe. And so we have more distributed opportunities. Now in South Africa, traditionally, the energy utility was based in the north of the country geographically, and it was coal-based. But with more energy related jobs, and it applies to Africa and to the globe, is that in renewable energy and in energy efficiency, they're distributed around the country. So we, for example, here on the south coast where I am, there's a lot of wind farms. There's a lot of opportunity there. There's also a company in the local industrial development zone where they are building wind towers, and the wind towers obviously have to, any IPP project has to have more local content. So we're seeing even PV companies being set up to build the panels. We're getting more financial green jobs, which are in the metro areas. And I see more and more ladies in top running jobs of portfolios of running buildings. So I was in African Energy in Durban in March, and I met a lady there in Cape Town, and she started doing the billing analysis, I think in the accounts department, and now she's worked her way up into managing a series of energy managers because she manages a portfolio of over 100 buildings. So ladies are moving up and into different positions, and not necessarily in the north of the country only, they are spread out across South Africa. In Africa itself, I mean, you've seen under COVID that we can stretch across boundaries, not only geographically in South Africa, but for example, IPEA, the Institute of Energy Professionals, who are accredited to deliver AEE programs in sub-Saharan Africa. And they do collaborate with training partners in Uganda, Nigeria, Mauritius, Rwanda, and Tanzania. And they will assist with training in countries that don't necessarily have training partners developed just yet. So that's across African boundaries that we can tap into these resources. And the good thing is, I suppose there are some ladies running behind the scenes there. They do have chapters in Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and Uganda. And the purpose of them is dissemination of information. So they would also encourage creating awareness, B2B development, and then stimulating industry activities. On a global scale, there's another lady I've met through LinkedIn, which is a fantastic tool, a lady called Bertha Dlamini. She's the president of African Women in Electricity and Power, and she's just won a seat as the South African representative at a table in Moscow to discuss the energy transition globally. So women are contributing and adapting, I think, and I'm hoping that Bertha will report back, you know, perhaps down through to my level and down to kind of our roundtable sort of levels. So I think that's another trend that we can see. And for me in South Africa, what I'm seeing a great trend, which is good for women and jobs, is that there's the energy efficiency is got her place back at the table. So what I was finding was a lot of renewable energy projects were being installed in the light of load shedding. We've had a lot of load shedding. In December, we had sort of level 6, which was at its worst. But now what's happening is that, and people weren't doing the energy efficiency first before they did the renewable energy because there was a panic for energy security. But now under COVID-19 and businesses are under stress, what we're finding is they're starting to look at costs, operating costs. So a low cost, no cost options are allowing us to get a foot in the door. And in 2014, 2015, we did a lot of energy auditing studies in various companies in South Africa. And those reports, it was under the UK Carbon Trust, those reports were kind of like literally filed away. So now I'm finding customers are dusting them off. And that allows me to get interns that are working with me who are energy auditors back out there so that we can actually revisit those reports. So I'm very happy to say that I think that energy efficiency is starting to be taken more seriously now, and we can obviously involve ladies. And allied to that, I think, is the conversations around sustainability. So, you know, we've seen sustainability, COVID, you know, the fact that we've seen a cleaner world, less pollution, it's something that is a reality now. And the conversations around circular economy, water, waste, and energy is involved in that sustainability discussion. So for me, it's pretty positive that these things are happening. We just need to obviously make them a reality, I think. So, and I think that's probably my 10 minutes, Carolyn.
Thank you, Heather. These 10 minutes seem to be flying past too fast. So many interesting things to hear about: sustainability, the whole digitization aspect, where women are, what's happening in South Africa, your comparative analysis between where you were before and where you are now. I think there's lots and lots to talk about. Most definitely would love to hear a little bit more from you as the program goes along. So ladies and gentlemen, we are getting into our question and answer session for the two speakers, for both Andy and Heather. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand or chat in the chat box and we shall then unmute you and you can ask your question. We request that you keep your questions to a minute or two so that we can allow as many people as possible to ask their questions. So the floor is open for question and answer and the chat box is open as well. All right, is there anybody with their hands raised? Moses, are you able to see it?
I'm not seeing any hand. You're free to raise your hand on the video as well. Ah, Jenny.
Okay, Jenny.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew and Heather. That was both really passionate and inspiring talks. And one thing really I'd like to sort of dig down a bit is to Heather is the opportunity of digitalization. You know, I think all of us have learned an awful lot in the last 4 months. And to Andrew's point, you know, COVID is not going away. It's not like something that just disappears. So, you know, how can we capitalize on the digitization? And, you know, maybe if we could just dig down a little bit further into that, some ideas around how it can benefit, how we can use it in the energy sector.
Thank you, Jenny. Digitization obviously is large. You know, it covers a lot of areas and topics. And I'm thinking more, I suppose, from my own experience, is that am based at an incubator in Port Elizabeth. And in the incubator, you will see that a lot of ladies and obviously some younger male students who are developing Internet of Things products. And so they looking at obviously the sensors, the big data, the cloud data coming back. How you manage that data, the data coming in is one thing, but how do you convert that into information which will be useful to a decision maker? So for example, one project, a fridge project, which I'm involved in, is that yes, you're getting the data in, but you need a regression analysis to see what the drivers are. Once the regression analysis is done, is there some predictive work that you can do? And the store manager basically just wants to know, you know, how much energy is being used and if his fridge door is being left open. But the maintenance guys want to know, you know, perhaps is that compressor running particularly hot? So what kind of information is being mined? How's it being used? There's a lot of work to be done at that kind of detailed level. And I think the benefit, as I've said, for women is that you can be doing that at a distance on your laptop and kind of flexi hours. So for me, it's a pretty exciting space to be in the digitization space. And even in training, you know, we've seen training courses being run online. Maybe, you know, maybe men and women are delivering it. I'm not saying it's specifically a gender thing, but there's more opportunity for that. And I'm seeing more and more of it in the energy sector. So I don't know if that kind of addresses your question, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you for that insight into the digitization space and what we can do with regards to making ourselves more accessible, making things more convenient, working from any location, any time, on any device, and then, in Andy's words, bundling that together to create a solution that works. Andy, you talked about us being knowledge workers. It's pretty much the same thing. It ties in, it dovetails into what Heather has spoken about. And being able to have the health space take into advantage the knowledge industry and having it as a basic need, having energy as a basic need in the health space. With the current focus on health globally, in this continent, in this country and globally, what proposal would you have to have that in that checklist? What can we do? How can we advise governments to take that up? Andy?
I would say that the opportunity here is bringing in the angle that Heather also talked about energy efficiency. It's already a requirement for facilities to, of a certain size to do energy audits, but in the healthcare space, because health is a continuous service, it has to be available. So we need to define the essential equipment that are used in healthcare to be efficient And within that definition, we can also have the reliability. And reliability, I think we literally say there's nothing as reliable, or I say there's nothing as sure as the sun. It's going to show up. Kenya Power is not as sure as that. So until Kenya Power gets there, let's get the essential equipment used in healthcare to be autonomous and to be on these kind of systems. So that is how I would want to frame the conversation. And you're doing it also from the perspective of you want to have and release more funds to be available in providing the actual healthcare. So why are you drowning these funds into a recurring expense that you can be able to pay off once and not incur it for the next 20 years? So these principles of energy efficiency start to make sense in terms of being able to enhance the capabilities of delivering better quality healthcare. So that is how I would bring it in. And these are tools that are already existing in terms of the energy management regulations. How many public healthcare facilities have done energy audits? How many of them can be able to put their critical equipment on renewable energy? So that in itself, I think, is a project and an opportunity that can be brought from the angle of energy and the current situation, or towards enhancing healthcare.
All right, great, Andy. We have a question from Brenda and from Sylvester. So we take Brenda first, then Sylvester, then we can move on with the next speaker. So Brenda, please come up, and then Sylvester. Welcome, Brenda.
Okay, thank you. My name is Brenda Jekosgei. I graduated recently from the Technical University of Kenya. I did a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and majored in energy and environment. So I will ask, my question will go to Heather, whether what advice would she give me as a very young person who wants to get into the energy space, and which areas, especially if I'm starting off, should I look at? I'm more passionate about renewable energy and things to do, of course, with and courses to do with providing clean, affordable, and reliable energy. Thank you.
Hi, Brenda. Well done on graduating with your chemical engineering degree. That's fantastic. For me, I think what would be key is to get some working experience. And it's tricky because we have a number of interns here in South Africa, and they're sponsored by a provincial program, and they've done the AEE courses, which is nice for us. So they have the qualifications. And then what they do is they're placed with industry. And so there's 30, I think, students on the program. And every year we'll have a couple of students with us. One set of students I had, we built an app, which is one of the awards we won for doing EPCs, auditing in buildings. And then this year, Quena is sitting up in the Limpopo area, and she's just helping me with my CRM system. So if you can get an internship somewhere, and even if you have to offer your services, to work with somebody like Andy or, Chris, just for a short while, just to pick up some experience, that then will allow you to sort of maybe make some decisions in which direction you'd want to head in. But for me, I think it's tricky because you do need that work experience.
Yeah.
I don't know
Very
if that
wise
really...
advice. It is wise advice. Experience is everything. Brenda, we encourage you to get in touch with us at the World Energy Day Secretariat. Let's see which programs, clients, etc., that we could hook you up with. So your passion will not just dissipate like that. Sylvester, your question, and then we do a quick poll and move on to the next speaker. Sylvester.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
My question is to the two panelists. One is that we're looking at energy efficiency. Let me first introduce myself. I work at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Center for Energy Efficiency and Conservation, an advisor on energy efficiency in industry. I'm looking at the energy efficiency angle, and particularly looking at the utility providers and their losses, and now thinking around it in line with the distributed renewable energy installations. where do we think is the space for distributed energy efficient, renewable energy installations in addressing or mitigating the losses in the distribution system and transmission system? Do we think that isolated renewable installations is the answer, or we still need massive integrated grid networks to support industry despite the losses that we incur in distribution systems? Thank you.
All right, so thank you for the question. Andy, shall you go first or Heather?
I don't mind.
Okay, let me.
Andy, go first.
Okay, let me take this one because this is something I think Sylvester and I, we've been discussing for quite a while, but I think the future is distributed. If you're looking at it purely from an efficiency point of view, and the systemic efficiencies is a compound of the entire network, while if you're looking at it from an efficiency point of view, it would be at the level of the technology that is applied on the ground. So if you combine that, then you will find that you will achieve a much faster improvement in efficiency in these small pockets than trying to make the entire network efficient in order to be able to reach the end user. And also look at it from the point of view of growth and looking at the development of technology. I can say from my own personal experience that it is cheaper, or it is possible, to generate on-site using renewable sources of energy, farm power for an isolated location than it is to buy it from the national grid or to get connected to the national grid. And that factor that if we were to take into serious consideration that would change how we do things is time. How long does it take to deploy? If somebody has identified an opportunity, I think it is somewhere in Baringo, where there's a resource that can be mined and processed and taken to market, but there's no grid connection, and they have to wait months or years before the grid connection comes in. While with a distributed technology, it would be a question of just deploying it in a matter of weeks. And if we consider that our growth potential is not in the built economy, it is in the unbuilt, untapped economy, then more and more we need to be able to deploy and move faster into those areas than try to wait for the entire grid system to grow. And I look at it from the example of telecommunications. How quickly was it possible to roll out a network of decentralized, interconnected systems than it was to create a physical network connected with copper? And we're still on the lag part when it comes to energy, while we have today the technologies to be able to do what telecommunications did using these renewable types of energy. So the more that we can start bundling our new demand with its own autonomous energy, the faster that we can be able to deploy and develop and create and harness these opportunities. Thanks.
Very, very well said. A lot to learn from the telecommunication sector, actually, in terms of rollout, deployment, decentralization, harnessing technology, as Heather talked about earlier, monitoring to see, what's going on in the network and how we can plug in. Heather, did you want to add something to that conversation?
Yes, please, if I can. Andy, I thought that was very, very well said, and your example of the telecommunications rollout is perfect analogy. Two things to that. One is on the technology side, you rely on that quite heavily, but I think the other thing to look at in distributed grids is maybe use. So we have some examples here in South Africa where we've used PV and put it on a local community hall or a local school. So the school can be used in the daytime for students, but nighttime for parent education. So I think that use needs to be taken into consideration, but it's very good use if that's the case. And then the other thing I'm seeing a lot of in South Africa is smart grids, smart mini grids. I'm seeing a lot of housing developments where And it is using smart technology, so it is a bit more expensive, where people are literally trading the energy between the PV systems on the houses within that development. So if a guy's not there, you can use his energy. Of course, it has all sorts of moral and legal relations, but that's another way. Is looking at it from the use as well as the technology point of view. Thanks, Carolyn.
Very, very, very great contributions there on use as well as the trading and the different aspects around the ability to deliver on that. We can run a poll, Moses, a quick poll before we take the next speaker. A lot has been said on energy and tech, and this has been in sync with our earlier thinking. The poll is up on the screen. Kindly put in your opinion. Let's see what this quick survey will yield, and then we can talk about it ahead of welcoming our next speaker. Okay. The poll should be on your screen. Please respond. We can give this a minute or so.
30 more seconds.
Right, we have half the people polling. We have another half to go. We can give them some 30 seconds. What are your thoughts? Okay, Moses, we can close in the next 10 seconds or so. You have 10 seconds more to put in your vote.
Okay.
All right, please share with us the results.
Great.
All right, there are the results of our thoughts. The question was, what do we feel would have greatest impact on the energy sector? Because right now there's a lot of focus on technology, much more than there was before. In fact, it has been said the greatest catapult to technological advancement has been COVID-19. So these are our results. We feel that Internet of Things is what both for home use and industry tech is what's going to have the greatest impact. And then we have 14% on machine learning and intelligence, 11% on robotics and RPA, and big data at 14%. So very interesting results. It looks like we all think that Internet of Things is what's going to take over this sector. And as we walk through this conversation and discussion, and as we go back to thinking through the things that we are doing and the projects that we are running on, the clients that we are working with, let's have that in mind. How can we have Internet of Things, have things run more efficiently, more savings, more conveniently, and have both the user experience and the environment in mind. Thank you for sharing the poll, Moses. We can move on. Okay, we are up next for our next speaker. Our next speaker comes from Tunisia. We were taking a journey around Africa, as you can see, and we are at the tip, we are at the top, and we are on the sides. And so our next speaker is from Tunisia. Would love to welcome Ayub Baba. I hope I am pronouncing your name well. It sounds like a very Kenyan name, Ayub Baba. Welcome, Ayub Baba. It is reigning presidents in this meeting. Ayub Baba is the current president for the Association of Energy Engineers Tunisia chapter. We are grateful for your attendance and for you gracing this occasion. Ayub has a passion for capacity building. He loves to see things shift and for people to gain knowledge and skills to be able to deliver. Because we can talk about everything that we want to talk about, but if there are no people to make it happen and ensure that it happens well and professionally, then we will have lost the cause. He's a consultant in the energy space. He does a lot of training work and policy work. And we welcome Ayub. We would love to hear the Tunisian experience. Please talk to us about what's happening in your country and capacity building generally. What can we do as Africa to make a difference? Welcome, Ayub. Moses, it's Ayub you need to spotlight.
Kindly raise your hand on video. Oh, Ayub, I see you. Sorry for that. Let me
welcome, Ayub.
Karibu sir. Welcome.
Yes. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, so many thanks, Caroline, for your introduction. It's my pleasure to join you today and to speak with a lot of keynote speakers from our continent. So I would like to thank you again to provide me this opportunity to share with you our region and also country experience in capacity building, and also this situation and this crisis impact on capacity building and energy transition. Maybe I can start with our country experience, for example, as maybe one of the best, or it's the first country in energy efficiency in our region regarding AFEX report from Arab region report in renewable energy and energy efficiency. So one of the maybe potential points that Tunisia has really gained on working on this decade to really ensure energy efficiency projects, because we have developed good energy efficiency results, and now we are starting developing renewable energy projects, and it's logical because we need to start in supply demand part and then supply part. So one of the points that I want to highlight is then, for example, Tunisia has set as itself the short-term objective of integrating green jobs into new national employment strategy in the 5 years ago. According to a study carried out in our country, green investment in different GVC, green value chain industry. So of 2% of GDP over 5 years ago could generate 300,000 direct jobs. And this is a good impact to really generate jobs in energy sector. More than 9, it represents more than 9% of total employment, and this will make it possible to strengthen regional development, create jobs, and restructure the national economy based on new technologies. Also, another point that Tunisia really enables young graduates seeking employment, and also in short and medium term to acquire skills for two main sectors. One, to enhance entrepreneurship in a green economy, so the development of SMEs in this field, and also strengthening employability to meet current demand in the green job market. So since we share maybe the same conditions, and maybe one of the characteristics of our continent is the diversity of our continent. So I think we need to act in these two parts to face the two main issues, since our growing population needs growing demand in energy. So we cannot ensure this transition, and we are speaking about the digitalization in energy sector without well-qualified people. So to ensure that, mainly with this situation also where nature is pushing us to develop renewable energy, digitalization our countries, since we cannot develop our countries without local competence and well-qualified competence. And when we are speaking about well-qualified people, the first step is to certify our people, so our engineers, our students. So we need to bring all stakeholders, industry, private sector, public, training, also academies. Like now, one of the benefits that our continent need to benefit from it is the programs that AEE provide in our country with our complementarity between North Africa and South Africa and sub-Saharan countries. We need to complement our roles and our lessons learned to share experience and to bring all stakeholders together and ensure this important transition to to face the main basics needs of energy. We are talking, well, in Tunisia, for example, we have a good electricity access. We don't have problem of reliability of our grid, but we are talking about smart grids now to to make this transition. So we need people who is well qualified in renewable. Our need mainly is, and this is not our company, our association in Tunisia is doing, upgrade our local skills here in Tunisia through an international reference provided by AEE. It gives us real added value to upgrade our local skills to ensure this transition from energy efficiency, from fossil fuel dependency to renewable energy. So we cannot ensure this without implementing programs and certification. For example, I give you an example. For example, our National Agency of Energy in Tunisia implemented or created a new job as certified from the government following the new codes. Like, for example, PV installer. So they trained more than 500 people ensure this mission. Also, last 10 years in 2004, since we developed, we made a lot of work in energy efficiency sector. So we developed a lot of codes like to improve, enhance cogeneration CHP, also to enhance audits. So Tunisia is the first country in the North Africa, I think, to have a mandatory energy audit since 2004. Also CHP consultancy, and now we are talking about to enhance ISCOs with new jobs, because as you know, when we are talking about capacity building programs, we need to customize our market regarding new jobs, since many jobs will disappear mainly now with digitalization, and the new jobs will be created as your sondage is showing us with the Internet of Things know-how demand. So a lot of new jobs will be needed by the market. That's why we need to bring all stakeholders together, industry, private sector, universities also, and all of these stakeholders need to work together to complement each other. And one of the benefit or advantage that our company and association is doing is to fill this gap or this need between different stakeholders, financial institution, public, and we are now working together to make proposals to finance, because one of the main issue that we can talk after is how to fund, since the GDP in our country and salaries is really, and main average is less than the global salary average. So people cannot really fund these programs. So we need to help them to fund it through many programs. In Tunisia, for example, we benefit from different programs in entrepreneurship, in green jobs, and also in employability, like USAID programs, like UNIDO, like different programs, but people don't have idea about that. So I think it's good to bring these stakeholders together and ensure our energy transition. Maybe the best thing that we are now talking about the basic and essentials needs about electricity access, about clean cooking, but one thing is very important is that the nature now and with this crisis is to pushing us through to digitalization, to the renewable energy production. So it's our opportunity to really benefit from this situation and make our progress to really customize these kind of trainings and capacity buildings to satisfy our local real need, because there is not people or international expert can help us, but at the end, who will do the work? It's our local workforce. So we cannot ensure this transition without our local engineers. So we need to focus and develop our people, our engineers, our experts, and work together, because Africa now is growing in population, and we need to face the energy poverty and energy problems, since more than 60% or 40% of energy poverty we have in Africa. So I think I complete my time. Many thanks, and I am at your disposal for any question, Caroline.
All right, thank you very much, Ayub, for that very interesting and passionate appeal for us to focus on the people, focus on building capacity, building local capacity, because that's the only sustainable way to do it, and to have our people trained and certified so that Africa can have a base of energy professionals that can deliver and deliver with excellence. I think we'll take on the next speaker. So please hold your questions, ladies and gentlemen. I know you have lots of questions for Ayub and to hear what's happening in his side of the continent. So we take up our next speaker, and then we can have both questions for both speakers. So our next speaker comes up from Nigeria. It is exciting to have a good gentleman from Nigeria. Kenyans have a very passionate space in their hearts for Nigerians, our Nigerian brothers and sisters. So we feel at home when we have you with us. Our next speaker up is the founder of EcoWatt, Nigeria. He is a Washington Fellow. Yes, we talked to you and we saw that you are a true leader, not just in the energy space, but generally. And so we have a leader in the house. And he is referred to as an EE. What is an EE, you might want to ask? An EE is an energy evangelist. And so if you're not an energy evangelist and don't have that in your title, then I invite you to think about your contribution in this space. So let's welcome Olankole Owe to speak to us about what's happening in Nigeria and to have a focus specifically on policy direction. What is policy like and what can we do based on the COVID-19 situation we are in? Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I'm glad to be privileged to be speaking to the participants, and I'm very sure that we're going to take a lot out of it today. I'm an engineer by profession, and I'm an entrepreneur in the energy sector with years of experience. During the course of my brief presentation, I would quickly like to touch on overview of the energy sector in the country, in our country, Nigeria, and also the impact of COVID on it, and what we should expect, to the new normal in terms of policy direction. Okay, so starting with the overview of electricity sector in Nigeria. Presently, Siemens just had to make an assessment of the need in the medium term, and they came up with 25 gigawatts of power to be available, in the medium term. but presently only 12 gigawatts is installed. And I mean, installed capacity, the power plants, and 75 of this is coming from Tama plants, while just 25 is from hydro. So we only depend on these two sources in the national grid anyway. And only 7 gigawatts of the 13 installed is available to give power, and just 3 gigawatts of it gets to the end users. So owing to a lot of issues, which I will itemize, and I made it up into 3 categories. I mean, why this gap of around 22 gigawatts to meet up with the medium term? So the first is actually the aggregate technical collection and commercial losses in the transmission and distribution chain in the energy electricity value chain. And it will interest you to know that Nigeria power sector is being privatized. I mean, it's been handed over to private sectors, the distribution and the generation aspect. Only the transmission is controlled by the government. Therefore, they have mandate to provide electricity to the people because it's now operated by private sector. So the first category of the main issue causing this gap in the country is these ATC&C losses, aggregate technical collection and commercial losses. And owing to unavailability of data, I mean, there are no data to actually forecast. So that is one part of it. Then also non-reflective tariff. Electricity sector, I mean, tariff in Nigeria is one of the lowest in the world. I mean, so it's not really cost reflective. So this is not making a business case for the private sector to actually invest in the infrastructure. And also there's a level of metering gap. I mean, that is also resulting into this unavailability of data because many customers, many end users are not metered their own estimation. And another one is issue of power rejection from the distribution companies. Sometimes there's power available to the distribution company to supply to the end users, but they don't take it because the capacity is not enough to take all the power, and sometimes the power might be available to unwilling buyer, and that will make them to not use this electricity. At this end, there's generation, but there's no utilization. Then another thing is the defective power demography. Sometimes the planning ought to be residential or to really be a bit separate from industrial layout. I mean, and you find this mix, and this is clashing on the power profile. So it's not making the utility to actually be flexible with the distribution of power. Then another second major issue on the power generation is gas constraint. We flare gas in Nigeria, but this gas is not used to generate electricity. Instead, it's being flared because there are no policy around that to actually use the flare gas. I mean, and so much constraint around power, gas to power, and that is actually limiting the amount that is available for generation. Then the key thought that we'll talk about is the national reliance on central grid. So we so much rely on central grid that is not making a state or encouraging decentralized generation. And the power grid is only able to wheel just 50% of the installed capacity. Even if you have so much power, you can't wheel it to the end users because the capacity of the transmission is very weak, and the country continue to actually depend on the national grid. So these are the 3 main issues contributing to these energy gaps. And looking at the solutions, because I mean, looking at the impact of this even during this time of COVID. during the lockdown, I mean, most commercial companies and industrial firms were not producing at optimal. So the demand for power in the commercial and industrial sector dropped, but the one for residential peaked because of people at home. So this actually affect, because in Nigeria, the way the tariff is structured, the industry people have, industry end users have tariff that is higher than that of residential. So now residential is consuming power, they can consume even up to what the commercial will be consuming, and at the same time their tariff is low. And this is actually making utility revenue to be dropping further. So this is a big issue, which is largely owing to improper planning. And because of this demography of power demand that I talked about. So that is actually a sad thing about the COVID impact. And the issue started coming to be resolved, like with solar, especially for isolation centers and some X sector. But the problem is actually the fact that we don't assemble a lot in Nigeria in terms of PV systems. So we still rely on importation. So the importation was restricted during the COVID time. So this is actually a big issue for even business owners that are looking into this direction of powering most of these X sectors, or probably, and this has also caused the cost of the materials to be increased because of this issue of importation. So we know that when things get back to normal, the new normal, we expect critical demand on the health sector, energy, the agricultural sector, and most especially local assembly and manufacturing. So there will be critical demand for power in this area, among others. So I'm thinking around policy. There's so many policies already in the country, around improving the power sector and the energy sector as a whole. But the problem is implementation. You have a lot of policy, but there are just so many that the issue is now the implementation. But if we can streamline and have a short-term policy and make the implementation enforced, then we can have quick wins in this regard. And I will be looking at the quick policy should be around passage of petroleum industry bill. This has been forever, in the Senate, yet to be passed. And this will actually address the constraint to gas, gas to power, which is likely, a real issue in the generation part of the electricity value chain. Then another one should be about cost-reflective tariff. Yes, we should expect, we know that the tariff presently is not cost-reflective, and this is not making a business sense to the utility, and it's really inhibiting them to invest further. Therefore, there should be a review of the tariff to encourage the utility to actually invest in the infrastructure. Nigerians are saying, even if they increase the tariff, but if the power is available and the tariff is increased, they will pay, gladly pay. Okay. Then another aspect too will be the development of decentralized generation. Like always relying on the grid will always slow us down. Companies can, state governments can start doing decentralized generation, building IPP. Utility can start looking in the direction of embedded generation, because a lot of industries have excess capacity because they don't rely on the grid, they rely on their self-generation. So they have excess capacity. And this can be bought by utility and distributed to the end users without actually relying on the national grid. Also, energy mix, so much reliance on the thermal plant, non-renewable means of generating electricity is a big issue. There should be, large-scale PV systems should have a feed-in tariff that is applicable and can encourage investors to actually invest in large-scale solar that can be integrated into the grid. and having a proper feed-in tariff. And this is the real bottleneck that has not made any of our grid to, the energy mix in the grid to for solar or wind to be part of it because of the feed-in tariff issue. Then lastly, policy around mandating the utility to actually have a solution to the ATC and C losses, because this is actually a big issue. Only just like 30% of electricity that is generated gets to the end users. So these are the quick wins and the policy that can be developed around this. And that ends my short presentation.
All right, thank you very, very much, Olankunle. Very well organized. The 3 points, the solutions we have tracked with you. A common theme that seems to be coming from all our speakers is decentralization, distribution, focus on health, the industries that will see the better light of this COVID-19 situation and where we need to focus, a focus on the people. You've talked about oil and gas. I think let's do a quick poll first, Moses, before we take question and answer for both Ayub and Olankunle. Let's talk about what's happening in the oil sector and what do we think is going to come out of it. The poll is on your screen. Let's do a quick poll. We have about 30 minutes to go and I know we need to stretch. So let's see what we have to say about this before Q&A. What are your thoughts? Okay, the poll is on your screen. All right, we can give another 30 seconds and then we look at our results. Okay, I think we are good to go. Maybe another 10 seconds for 1 or 2 more polls. All right, Moses, I think we can look at the results. We can look at the results. There are the results of our poll. This is how we feel. All right, 45% of us are thinking medium term. The question was, what do we foresee? What is the anticipated impact on all the gains we have been making over the years because of the current situation with regards to carbon crude oil owing to COVID-19? So short term, medium term, it means that we are hopeful. We are hopeful that things will get better and turn around. Some programs may come back over time. That's what 45% of us are saying. And 41% is that just short term, the impact will be short term and then we shall rise again. So let's keep the hope up and keep the anticipation up. Thank you, Moses, for that. We can now take questions. We shall take questions in the same format, questions for Ayub and questions for Olankunle. We keep the questions short, 2 or so minutes, and then we move on to our last speaker for the day. We have about half an hour on the program, and then we shall wrap it up. So questions, you may raise your hand or you may chat, and we shall call upon you to speak.
Martin has raised his hand.
Okay, Martin, who else has raised their hand? We can take 2 or 3 people.
Kindly raise your hand on your video.
Raise on video or on chat, or there's a sign for raise hands. Okay, we can go with Martin's question. Martin?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Martin Ochieng. I'm an energy engineer with Innovators Limited. Yeah, and a budding professional within this particular space. So my question goes to Mr. Ayub Baba, tailored towards mostly capacity development. So my question is, with the changing times and of course, the movement to a more digitized approach to everyday life, do you believe that there needs to be a modification in the curriculum for professional capacity building approaches, such as, of course, the CEM and CMVP and such courses, to reflect, of course, the changing times? Do you believe that these particular courses need to be tweaked a little to reflect, of course, the need for the new skills, to reflect, of course, the need for potentially a contactless approach for energy management in this space?
Well, many thanks for your interesting question. So, yes, I think our programs, mainly CMVP and CEM, following this crisis and COVID change, need to be customized mainly to and give more importance to the Internet of Things, digitalization, and automation of energy system management. So we can focus more in this part. Also, for the measurement and verification methodology and protocol, I think we will make improvement next editions and take in consideration this new changes and customize it, since methods need to be updated and take in account this new maybe crisis and adapted to our industry, since digitalization is now a basic need and mandatory, not a privilege for our companies and the energy sector. So our programs need to focus more and to be updated, and also improvement, since the committee of AEE is always improving. That's one of the benefits of our programs, and also that's one of the main benefit and advantage to be among an international organization where different energy experts share experience from their own experience, from their countries, from their lessons learned and they practice, and make this experience in practice and in courses to ensure the transfer of the know-how to the new engineers and other experts. And this is the way where we can upgrade our skills. So we need to be among such organization, and this is our role in our region. So to complete each other with the whole puzzle of the world community of energy experts. So yes, I think I hope I address your question. So let me know if you have another question.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any more hands up, Moses?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. As we wait for hands to go up, I wanted to get the perspective from Nigeria. It's very interesting to see that IUB is saying that generally the distribution and availability of electricity is not an issue on that side. But in Nigeria, the rumors that we hear on this side over and over again is that Nigerians speak very loudly because they have to speak over the sound of their generator. So that's a joke that keeps on being peddled around. So Olamkunle, what with your passion for policy, what can be put in place really to have renewable as the main source? Because the sun shines all the time, as Andy said. If there's something that won't change, that's what won't change. Where?
Okay. There's a plan to have a share of renewable in the energy mix. Definitely, we might not. It will be a really long-term thing to rely on. To say we'll be powered 100% by renewable. At least let something get to the grid from renewable, aside hydro, that is on now. So the main issue is actually the policy should be around feed-in tariff. tariff, I would say. Demand is there for power. I mean, across the population is so huge, and so the demand is there, but the problem is actually the feed-in tariff, because end users are paying, I mean, a very small tariff for power that is coming from Tama, which is actually a bit cheaper than the PV at the onset, you know. So, but governments will have to be the one to pay subsidy on this, and the subsidy the state of emergency and around that, I'm sure investors might be willing to, I mean, invest in that too, because it's largely owing to interest rates. It's time to recoup back the money, is what is usually costing the high tariff for solar in the beginning. But if there is a state of emergency on that around and policy around that, I'm very sure that the issue of feed-in tariff will not be a bottleneck anymore.
All right. All right, thank you for that. Great. Sylvester, your hand is up. We can take one last question before we move to our last speaker for the day. Yes, Sylvester?
Yes, thank you for this chance again to speak. And I want to direct my question to the gentleman, the engineer from Nigeria. COVID-19 has presented a very interesting scenario for Africa. And in his presentation, he mentioned the throttling of importation of solar products and everything else. And this gives us a chance now as Africa to relook at our strategy internally and overall to see what is it that we can do. So my question would be that apart from the capacity building, which you mentioned, what other opportunities present themselves to Africa generally in the short term, in the medium term, and maybe in the long run, to make sure that Africa can now develop its own solutions in energy and energy engineering? Thank you. Hello.
Who have you directed the question to?
He directed it to Olankunle.
Olekunle.
Okay.
Is your internet all right, Olankunle? It looks like he has an internet challenge. Okay, as we wait for him to come up and his internet to come through, I think we can onboard the next speaker, and then we will pause that, park that question up until when we have connectivity once again. So here we are on the final stretch of our run. You know, we are Kenyans, we are marathoners, and we talk in running terms all the time. So we are heading to the finishing line. And of course, we head to the finishing line in high sprints. And we are making no apologies for our nepotism. Our Ugandan speaker is our last speaker. So our brother on the side, just next to us from the same family of East Africa, is our next speaker. So we have insights from Uganda coming right up. So Elvis Sekate is the vice president of the AE chapter from Uganda. He's passionate about energy efficiency. He's been taking strides to make change in his country and in the region in general. And he's very passionate about having energy professionals work through having efficiency at the top of mind and deploying it in all sectors and all of the different pillars of the economy. Elvis will be talking to us about what's happening in the Ugandan scene, what we can do differently, how COVID is affecting the situation there, and generally energy efficiency tips to chart the new normal that we need to chart towards. So welcome, Elvis. We look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, Africa. Carol, thanks for the kind introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. For us to be able to go through this presentation, the energy outlook of Uganda, I have a summarized and selected outlook which I would like us to have in order to enable me paint a picture of the Uganda energy sector. The Uganda energy mix is about 90%. About 90% of the total primary energy consumption is biomass. Electricity is contributing only 1.8% to the national energy balance, while fossil fuels contribute about 9.3. You can see there is a huge gap and an opportunity when it comes to electricity, renewable inclusive. Now the breakdown of the electricity generation, the installed capacity, as per the Electricity Generation Authority report, by end of December 2019, installed capacity was 1,200 megawatts, with hydro going away with 80%, thermal 8.1%, cogeneration 7.7%, solar PV 4.1%, and others including wind, etc., contributing to 1.1 megawatts, which translates into 0.1%. Again, here we also see another opportunity for especially renewable energy. Electricity demand is about 600 megawatts, that is peak demand, whereby residential takes to 24%, commercial 11%, and industrial taking a lion's share of 65%. However, there are challenges of demand side energy losses, not forgetting transmission and other losses. And these actually point to a need for energy efficiency in the electricity supply chain. And also need to note that 26% currently have electricity. So we need to balance between bridging the gap of electricity access, but at the same time, we also need to keep tabs on energy efficiency. Now, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, Uganda apparently is easing the lockdown, and quite a number of sectors that are yet to open include the private sector, the public transport, education institutions, and the entertainment sectors. These are still under the lockdown, but business has already resumed in Kampala and other parts of the country. Also to note that we experienced curfew between 6:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Precautionary measures, including standard operating procedures, have been put in place for those businesses that have resumed. So we expect this to be the new normal. These procedures and precautionary measures are going to remain for some time because, as previous speakers said, COVID is still with us, and we have to find a way of living with it. It's not going tomorrow. Now, the key learnings, most of the resources, I'm sure most African countries can attest to it, resources have been allocated or diverted to the health sector to ensure that we fight the COVID-19. However, the energy sector, among other sectors, has been severely affected by COVID-19, whereby business has come to a standstill, transport slowed down, trade, and other economic activities. This is largely the case worldwide and in Africa. I got some information from the IEA, which actually stated that for those countries that are experiencing full lockdowns, the decrease in energy demand is estimated to be 25%, and those ones that are experiencing partial lockdowns, the decline is about 18%. So this is representative of Uganda and probably other African countries. Now, this came with the current drop in the oil prices, combined with the decrease in the demand for energy, since industries and commercial establishments are not working due to the lockdown. But again, the speaker from Nigeria mentioned that there's an increase in residential or home energy demands due to the fact that there are lockdowns and people are staying home, and in most cases, people are working at home. So this provides a golden opportunity to diversify and pivot towards a cleaner and more efficient energy sector. UNIDO in its publication put it right, and I quote, the prioritization of energy efficiency and the renewable sector offers industry competitive solutions to reduce power bills, rapidly generate new jobs, curb carbon emissions, and save money all at the same time. Okay, so we are moving now to the new normal of smart energy solutions, and energy efficiency has to be at the center of these solutions that we need to provide. The next step and how we are going to adapt the new normal. One, we must understand as an assumption that we are going to experience or continue experiencing population growth. In Uganda, it is said that we are expecting a baby boom early next year due to the effects of the lockdown and working at home. I'm sure most other African countries can relate. Energy efficiency and renewables are going to remain at the center stage or at the forefront of this, because as economies decline, there will be a need to cut on budgets, reduce on costs, and I believe energy efficiency offers such opportunities for organizations and even governments. There's also an emerging e-mobility. I remember the e-mobility conference in Nairobi, which happened in February. I remember Kenya set a target of 500,000 e-vehicles. And also from that, we got to learn that other countries, especially in Europe, are actually having targets and even deadlines on e-mobility, as well as efforts to phase away fossil fuels. I think this is going to take shape, especially after COVID, and this is going to be a new normal. I mentioned earlier on that domestic and residential energy consumption will increase, and here we need to look at some alternatives. For instance, solar water heaters. I understand Kenya has arrangements and regulations on solar water heaters. I think in Uganda, we need also to follow suit, because there are huge amounts of savings that can come throughout these simple interventions. And of course, jobs will be lost. If you have been on the internet, you have read of memos from different organizations stopping workers from coming to work, among others. Jobs will be lost, and they will continue to be lost. However, the good news is that new ones will emerge. In the case of Uganda, with a high unemployment rate, where 70% of youth are unemployed, energy efficiency and renewable energy sectors can create more jobs. So ideally for the policymakers, they should look into it and ensure that resources are channeled to energy efficiency and renewables, because it has a huge potential. It has worked for other countries. It has a huge potential for creating more jobs. Then there's also an issue of minimum energy performance standards, the MEPS. For the next steps, it is my wish and appeal that they are implemented in Uganda. There have been so many discussions centered around the MEPS, but these discussions need to be concluded and implemented. Then energy management systems for the energy management in industrial and commercial sectors. This is a framework that can support these large energy consuming entities to ensure they monitor their energy and they save on the energy. Energy efficiency legislation to spur and regulate the energy sector. Uganda, we have one, energy efficiency and conservation bill, which is still in the making, and stimulus packages to include energy efficiency programs, for example, energy efficiency networks, and support SMEs in the energy efficiency and renewable sectors. In summary, and stimulus packages can do. We've had success stories. I'll share one in the April 16th UNIDO publication, which said the American Recovery and Investment Act of 2009 designated over US 90 billion to promote clean energy. This bill, or this act, is credited with the explosion of America's clean energy economy, which created hundreds of thousands of new energy efficiency jobs and a platform for tech companies like Tesla to thrive. End of quote. There are also such success stories of this kind of legislation in Morocco, and we've had one from Tunisia, South Africa, and Kenya. Now, a case for Uganda, there's need to expedite the energy efficiency and conservation bill and subsequent legislation, which we believe will create jobs and opportunities for energy auditors, energy managers, industry inspectors, energy equipment manufacturers and suppliers, as well as energy financing institutions, among others. It will also support companies involved in energy efficiency and renewable, as well as e-mobility. Like, for example, we have Kira Motors in Uganda, which is manufacturing e-buses. We also have an innovation on e-motorbikes in Kampala, which is run by an enterprise called Zembo, and other innovations in the energy efficiency and renewables. So this legislation, among others, is one of the things that are required at this point in time, and in the new normal that will spur energy efficiency as well as related activities. I submit.
All right, thank you very much, Elvis. Thank you for your submission. Very interesting submission. You have talked about many things happening in Uganda. In East Africa, we feel that Uganda is way ahead of the rest of the countries in terms of putting in place what it needs to take to shift to the new normal. So we are playing catch up. It is interesting to have this focus on regulation, because we in Africa, we seem to respond to compliance quite a bit. When there's a compliance directive, then we seem to respond to that much more than the gains and the wins and the attractions. So that's an area that we need to look into through the entire continent. Before we put up questions for Elvis, because we have 10 minutes to go to the end of our program, we have been sitting for long. I think it's time to work our brains a little bit. So we have a small challenge, and the challenge goes as follows. Please private chat to our secretary. Our secretary is Warren, so locate Warren on the chat. And please private chat to Warren the names of our 5 speakers. The person that private chats him with the names first, correct and first, will be the winner of this challenge. You have exactly 1 minute to do this. Locate Warren on private chat. You are allowed to refer. Please type the full names of all our 5 speakers today, and we want to see the first person with the correct names. If you're in the secretariat, you are not allowed to take part in this challenge. I can see you all typing furiously. Stop typing. Everybody else is allowed to take part in the challenge. The full names, private chat. Warren, you have a minute to do that, and then we'll take questions. Mr. Timer, you will show us when 1 minute is up. Okay, is our 1 minute up yet, Mr. Timer? All right, time is up, time is up. No more results coming in. Mr. Secretary, you may close the polls. We shall announce the winner at the end of this meeting, and we look forward to awarding somebody who is quick to think, because in the new normal, we need to be very observant. We need to have attention to detail as energy professionals, and we need to be able to quickly respond and adapt to change. And so we'd want to see who that professional is at the end of this meeting. So in the next 5 minutes or so, we shall take questions for Elvis. And there was one question for Olankule earlier. We can take that if his internet is back. So by a show of hands, any questions for Elvis? You may raise your hands on the screen or write on the chat or put up the hand raising sign. Okay, Chris, your hand is up. Question from you, Chris. We can unmute Chris.
Hey, thanks, Carol. Thanks, Elvis, also for that great presentation and insights. I just had a question around policy, and I've known Uganda for quite some time. It's the brother from the other mother. And I've been wondering about their energy bill that, has been in Parliament for quite some time, especially how that policy is going to stimulate the energy efficiency market. I'm just wondering if Elvis probably can give us insights of how to fast track policy. Is there a way in which you can be able to fast track this policy, maybe through advocacy, or what other means can we be able to fast track these policies so that they don't they do not grow ice in Parliament? Is there a way in which you can be able to, fast track these policies so that they get signed and implemented?
Who has the question been addressed to kindly?
To Elvis. To Elvis. We can unmute Elvis.
Okay. Thank you, Chris, for the question. We all realize, and probably some energy sectors can be frustrated by the fact that such a critical legislation that would spur energy efficiency in the country has been shelved this long. However, we must understand that governments have priorities, I would say. And I don't want to say that energy efficiency at this point in time is not a priority, but I also have to point out that it has not been given due attention that it requires. Sometimes is overridden by some pressing and demanding issues as far as the government is concerned. However, it is important, as Chris, you've alluded, there's need to advocate. Maybe I didn't give a small introduction. We have the Energy Efficiency Association of Uganda, which is an AE chapter. And one of the activities or the objectives is to advocate. Now, the Energy Efficiency Association Uganda with other stakeholders, we have contributed actually to this bill, and we continue to advocate. But as I mentioned, the issue are the priorities at the table. And apparently, we need to do more advocacy. That's all I can say about it.
All right, so advocacy. This is a running theme even from the last roundtable that we had. And it ties into the question that Sylvester had asked earlier to Olakunle about Africa owning its own solutions, capacity building locally, and now with the throttling of imports, what can we do to be self-sufficient? So advocacy for self-sufficiency, advocacy for policy adoption so that it's not on ice or dusty on shelves with the government. And so we need to advocate as energy professionals in whichever forums that we can. If we need to speak at roundtables like this, we need to do it. If we need to petition and write letters, we need to do it. If we need to write more and be more visible in different spaces so that our voices can be heard, and the great information that we have to share can be out here, then it can pick up traction. If we need to use social media platforms, which are more and more becoming advocacy tools, then we need to do that. Because as energy professionals, we find that we often don't communicate enough. We know what we want. We are expert at what we do. We have the information. We have great capacity and technical skills, but communication is the gap. So we need to bridge that gap and take this to the next level. With 5 minutes remaining into our program, I'd love for us to put on chat any further questions we might have, and our speakers would be able to answer that separately. And we can then put that down and respond to you because we have your documentation and your emails. Would also love for you to give us feedback. So if we could have the feedback poll come up, we would be happy about that. And then we can wrap up and give our final remarks and call it a day. It has actually been 2 hours. Would you believe it? It is 2 hours short of just 5 minutes. So please give us feedback on this poll, and then we can also put up the feedback slide, and on the chat, we can take your proposals for next topics. So we have about 2 minutes to do that. Okay. So there's the poll, and then there is also the questions on the screen. Please respond to us on chat. You may chat any one of the secretaries or just put it in the chat. So feedback for the next webinar, and what topics would you be interested in so that we may gather speakers. We have received a request for a webinar for the youth, for young people, for young energy upcoming professionals so that we can speak into the space of youth and innovation. There's been a consistent request for that. Please put in any further areas you feel would be important and what we can include. And yes, I know you're waiting to hear who the winner is. Once we are done with this feedback session, we can announce the winner. Okay, Moses, you can end the poll. I think we have received all the polls. We will take that feedback later. So give us feedback on what you want us to improve and any topics you would like for us to cover in the next upcoming webinar. Okay, another 1 minute or so to do that. All right, thank you for your feedback. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. Please put in your diaries 26th of June. 26th of June is our next webinar. We are doing this monthly. So 10 to 12 is the timing for that. So 26th of June, please book your calendars. We will send you a calendar invite and the registration form to register for the online webinar. We will take into consideration the feedback that you have given, and we shall prepare the report from these discussions and share that with you as well. So before we give our vote of thanks, and to thank all our speakers and everybody who has shown up, we've had a consistent attendance throughout at about 40, 45 members. Let us announce the winner of the challenge. The attention to detail, the adaptation to change, the quick to respond challenge winner. Drum rolls. Mr. Secretary Warren, do you have the winner? Are you ready to unveil the winner?
Yes. Thank you, Carol, for this meeting. Thank you for coordinating everything that has gone into making this a possible event. And going straight to the winner for today, it's Mr. Peter Mushiri. So he's the one who sent in all the names correctly, even though he wasn't the first, but he was the one who sent in all, he sent all the names correctly. So thank you, Mr. Peter Mushiri.
All right, shall we give a hearty round of applause to Peter Mushiri? You are our winner for the day. We celebrate you. We celebrate that it is not always the first to get there. It is the people that do the right thing. And so as energy professionals, we encourage that we do the right thing. And because one small mistake could be extremely costly in our sector and in our areas of influence. And so therefore, let's not just rush to solutions, even as we chart the path to the new normal, let's do it and do it correctly. Yes, we need to adapt to change and move with speed, but we must do it and do it correctly. And so, Mr. Peter Mushiri, you walk away with a great, great book on leadership. This book is called The Catalyst, How to Change Anyone's Mind by Jonah Berger. The Catalyst, How to Change Anyone's Mind by Jonah Berger. And this is a very important book for us as energy professionals because we need mindset change. We need people to adopt the policies that we want to put in place. We want people to change behavior. We are advocates for behavioral change. We are advocates for policy change. We are advocates for capacity building. We are advocates for the energy space to be put in its rightful position. And so therefore, when we say that how to change anybody's mind, this book will empower you and empower the world around you. So we want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking your time to be here. Our speakers, all our 5 speakers from all over Africa, we are truly grateful for your presence here, your knowledge, your insights, and being generous enough to come here and share them with us, take questions from us. And we honor you and acknowledge you for that. May you be truly blessed as you go about changing the energy sectors in your country. There's a lot for us to discuss as a continent. Let's get together and have more discussions and move things forward in the direction of our desire to have our SDG 7 on clean energy, energy change, energy efficiency come to life and be implemented world over. COVID is here, yes. COVID is here to stay, yes. But what are we doing to manage that change and to move forward with it? And with those few words, I want to call this meeting to a close. I kindly request that we put on our cameras so that we can take a screenshot. Moses, you can put us in gallery view. We take a screenshot for our communication purposes and reporting purposes. So let's have our cameras on and our great smiles on. We take a photo and we hereby officially call the meeting to a close.
Okay, let us all have our cameras on. Give us at least 15 seconds to do that. Then we'll take a screenshot. Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay, when I count down, let us all smile. Okay, wait. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome.
All right, thank you very much, Moses. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful weekend ahead of you. Thank you for participating in this discussion, and let's make the difference that we want to see in this world with regards to energy. You are free to leave the meeting. Thank you very much.